Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing very well. We have week 11. It is now week 11, yes. Week 11, week 12, week 13, week 14, week 15. This is our fifth to last week, and we are cruising right along. You have your flag redesign project due at the end of this week. Make sure that you're taking care of it, that it's all on board, that you're I want you please to make sure and double check or triple check that your video is viewable. And that's very important. I can't stress that enough. This week, we're going to take a dive into English. We're going to look at how English has shaped and reshaped itself over the centuries, over the past 1,000 years, and its influences, what its influences are, being Latin and Gaelic and German and French and all the new exciting things that have influenced and made English what it is. And so it is something interesting. We're going to have, so we have the flag project, and then I'll have to re-examine and see how things are going, whether we do an online test or we do another project. But we'll worry about that next week. I'll have to see how your flag projects look. I prefer the project because then you're creating language, but we'll have to see how things are. Anyways, things are going well. Things are progressing very well. I'm very excited to take a look at your projects this Friday, well, after this Friday, and we'll go from there. So this week is all about English and getting into English a little bit. If you've taken or are taking EP1, then today's lecture dovetails. It connects quite nicely with EP1 because it has to do with pronunciation and how English sounds and why it sounds the way it does. All right then, with that, let's get right into it. Thank you, and we'll see you in a little bit in the lecture. Bye. Let's talk about English today and talk about how it's kind of hard and how it's difficult and rather nonsensical in many ways. And there's reasons for that. So this week we're going to go over a brief overview, so to speak, brief, about 45 minutes or 50 minutes, about the influences on English and why there's a lack of consistency within the language. But before we get too far ahead, your flag redesign project, you should be moving along. You should be getting ready to submit. Make sure you have those submissions on eClass before the due date. It is coming up. And so today we're going to talk about, language drift, how language changes over time, over years, over centuries, over millennium, over thousands of years. And then I'm going to briefly talk about the problems of slang and some of the problems there are with that. So languages grow and morph over time. Every living language has changed drastically over the centuries. Korean today is different from the Korean that people used 100 years ago, which is different from the Korean used 200 years ago or 500 years ago. So that's true. Like, the Korean of the time of Sejong Daewang, that was a different Korean with different letters, different vocabulary. Obviously, different vocabulary. We have different words now for things, different pronunciation as well, and that's very important. Pronunciation can shift, and entire sounds can be dropped from the language. So why is that? Some of the major influences on language changing is that of migration, people moving, not individuals, populations of people moving. And that has happened and it continues to happen throughout all human history. People move from place to place, trying to find a better place to live. So we have migration, colonization in the past, of course. Of course, I'm from North America, but 500 years ago, My hometown didn't exist, and different people with a different language lived there. But populations get moved around and shifted around, or removed, as it can be. There's forcible removal as well, but it can definitely happen. It happens all over, of course. There's many different famous migrations. The Germanic people into Europe, the Turkic people from Central Asia into the rest of the world, and especially what we now call Turkey. Turkish people aren't from Turkey. Well, originally they're from, well, the Central Asia, the Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, those places. And Greek people used to live in Turkey. So it's all different things. So there's a lot of influence here, and based on populations. So, for example, there's a lot of loan words as well. As English speakers today, we're okay using the Spanish word loco, which to describe someone who's crazy. We do this a lot, using different language words, borrowing, loan to other things. So let's take a look at a few things. Let's take a look about where English is from. So, very strictly speaking, on this picture right here, this red part, that's England. That's England. These other things, so we have England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Ireland. There's France down here. We have the Channel Islands. That's part of the UK. We have the Shetlands and the Shetlands, and up here the Faroes. Norway's over here. But this is where English is from. It's from England. It's that place specifically. In Scotland, even though they speak English now, it's not their native language. It's not their original language. They had a different language. They have a different language now too. But let's talk about Britannia. Britain is the word, or Britannia is the word used that the Romans used when they came to England. And the Romans had cities there. This is from about 383, AD. And they made cities. And of at least one of these cities. They called it Londinium. It's right here. And we call it London now. That was founded as a Roman city. Other cities like Bath and things like that. There's a lot of old Roman towns. And the Romans were in England for, about 200 years before things got too difficult. You can even see here this Hadrian's Wall. There were too many Scottish people, but they weren't Scots. They were called Picts. They were different people who were coming over and stealing sheep and people, so they had to try to stop it. And so they built a wall. But anyways, this was Roman England. The rest is still what we call Gaelic. We see Irish, the Scoti, that's where Scotland comes from, and Pict. And Pict is another group of people. So the Romans were big influence. So we have the Gaelic, the so-called, they are the native people, the original people, Gaelic, and then, or the Celtic, as you might call it. They speak Gaelic, so they're the Celtic original people. Then we have the Romans, and then the Romans have to go home. Then we've got, in the 5th century, we've got the Germans, or the Scandinavians. We call it the Anglo-Saxon. Anglo-Saxon. Maybe you've heard of this before. It's the word we use now to talk about English people. Anglo-Saxon. Anglo is Anglia, this part of Denmark. Saxon is Saxony, this part of Germany. And these people were Vikings. But they weren't really Vikings. They were just Germanics. And Vikings we think of Scandinavia. But anyways, these were Germanic peoples. They weren't Germans. They were Germanic. They were old Germans. And they came over and made their own kingdoms. And they brought their own language. So we've got Gaelic, Latin, language of the Romans. Now we've got old German coming in and mixing in with the language. Then we've got Danish people coming in, and now we have Danish kingdoms, we've got Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, and we've got original or native kingdoms as well. And these people speak different languages, and they're mixing in with each other. We have Wessex and Essex, Northampton, Northumbria. We've got all these fun words and places. And this is where we're getting into some very interesting vocabulary as well. For example, the word man, M-A-N. In English, when we want to pluralize something, most of the time we put S on the end. So man, but we don't say mans, we say min. And that's because of the influence of the German and Danish. And then, so this is about in 800, we have the Danish people come over. Then, Danish were actual Vikings. And then in 1066, more people came in. We had Norwegians coming in from the north to conquer England. And we had French people, not really French people, but they're mostly French, coming in from the south. And William of Normandy is here, he conquered England and he became King of England. And so he spoke French. And so people started speaking some French and French vocabulary into their words, into their language. And then England started spreading out and started influencing other countries. Now, we see here in the red, these are countries that England directly or indirectly controlled. All these red parts are actually much more direct colonies. America too, I don't know. These are members of the Commonwealth. So America, Canada, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, these are quite famous as speaking English. India as well, they speak English there as a common language because India is a modern construct of a country. And so because of this, they speak English. If you go to Malaysia, Brunei, they speak English there as well, in addition to their native languages. But in India and Pakistan and other countries like that, they're very big countries, so English is used as a common language. So India is a very big country. Someone from the north and someone from the south, their native languages they're not going to understand each other. They're very, 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 very different. Just imagine someone from Korea trying to talk to someone from the Philippines. There's no mutual intelligibility. They can't understand each other in their own languages. So a third working language, a common language, is used. In this case, English, because that was the language of the controlling power. So that's how English spread throughout. Now, as I think you know and remember, English in America is different from English in England, which is different from English in South Africa, which is different from English in India, which is different from English in Malaysia, which is different from English in Australia, which is different from English in New Zealand, which is different from English in America. Each region has their own vocabulary. Not 100% different, of course, but there are differences, and we use different words for things. And we do use some different grammar as well, in addition to the obvious one of different pronunciation, different ways of speaking. And in a future lecture, we're going to go really more in depth examining regional and national accents. And it will help us better listen and understand these people when they talk. And there's some other differences as well we'll get into. But right now, we're just talking about where English is from. But here, if we look at the screen, sometimes we don't always look at the screen, we see Old English. I want you to look at that. Look at these words. 1, do you recognize these characters? Some of them we do. Like, that looks like an H and a W. And then there's like a kind of an A thing, then an E, then a T, then W-E-G-A-R-D-E. And then there like this thing. It's like a kind of a P, maybe? Yeah, we got a lot of them, and we got this doohickey. Looks very fun. And we got A and E mixed together. Got lots of different words here. So what I'd like us to do, let's listen to this old English, and this is the opening words to a very old story. It's a Beowulf. It's an old English story.
What way gar dana in yar dagum feud kuninga thrim ye frunan hutha athalingus elin fremi oft shield shaving shad and a threatum monigum maig thum meru setla oftan egg so de erlas suthan arist wert fashaft fundi hedas frovra jebad weox under voknum weorth mundum tha og that him eig wilch dar setindra over kron rade huran shulde gomban yilda. That was good kuning. Them avra was, after Kenneth, young in yardroom, for a good Sunday fokid frogre. Fear in tharve onja, that he drugon alder laze longe wheel. Him thus lifrea wodres walden, wordare foria. Beo was brene, blad wire sprang, shoulders avra shedilandum in. Swashal young guma, gore rearchan, thromum feo hifdum fara berne, that hine an
Okay, we'll stop there. It continues on, but you know, I don't know how much you understand, but I can tell you, myself, John Harrison, as a native English speaker who's read a book or two, I don't understand, I would say, 99% of this. I think I might understand a little bit, a tiny, just a sliver, just a little cracker of it. But we hear how it sounds. We hear how this is Old English. It is not English. It sounds very, very different. It sounds German. It sounds Old German at that, which it is. Old English is a Germanic language. It's not a Romantic language. It doesn't come from Latin like, say, French or Italian or Spanish or Romanian does. It comes from the north, and it sounds harsher. It doesn't sound pretty. But let's look at a bit of it.
What way gardena?
What regardeneda?
Yar dagum.
In Yardargum. So we have Yargardum.
Feud kuninga.
Feukuninga. So we see it's a very dramatic language. Of course, this Beowulf it's an epic poem. You can see he's reading from a book here. And so it's meant to be dramatic. It's about a hero who kills dragons and monsters. So yeah, it's very dramatic and brave and all those wonderful things. But we can see here, even though this is largely unrecognizable to us as modern English speakers, because this is from 500 to 1000 AD. So this is before Joseon dynasty for us. There are little bits here, and I think we can see some. We can see the pronoun him and he, even though it's spelled differently, the sound is there. And if you're taking EP1, you're learning about pronunciation. Sound and spelling of the word are different. And so writing and speaking are different because pronunciation is just that, sound, focusing on the sound. And at this time, 500 to 1000 AD, people didn't write things down in English. It wasn't a written language. So we had to write it down. He had to write it down so you could read the book. But they didn't really write it down, so spelling wasn't important. As long as you could say the word correctly and understood what the word was, that's all that mattered. And then also we see the word here, God. But he didn't say God, he said good, which which happens, and so that was, which is closer to what they say in German for God, which is Gott, Gott, Gott. So it is. We see a lot of some of the sounds we hear in English, and also we hear like Drugen. Now we call that a dragon, but we see that we see the influences there. So. And of course, it sounds German because it came from German. It's West German. So if you were to take a look at modern German and just read it, you would be able to understand more than you would think. A lot of vocabulary in German looks similar to English, and I have here some examples like man, 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 man. Cat, Katze, cat, cat, Katze, cat, Katze. It's pretty close. 9, 9, 9, 9. The numbers in particular, they sound very, very similar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those, like especially 7 and 7, they're very, very, they sound similar. For example, in number 6, 6, 6, 6. Basically, land, 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 land. The pronunciations change, but the spelling, the word, and the meaning are the same. Water, Wasser, water, Wasser. Basically the same. Now, even if the vocabulary is pretty similar, the grammar isn't. I studied German in high school. I was really bad at it, and it was I had a very, very hard time with the grammar. But that's Old English. So this is the Germanic influence on English. Now we go to Middle English. Now, mentioned before, a man from Normandy, which is part of France, named William, he invaded England and he became king. And he and his helpers, his supporters, they spoke a kind of French. Once again, just like how the English we speak today is not like the English they spoke back then, the French he spoke wasn't the French they speak today. Even modern French, if you look at the difference between the French in Montreal in Canada and the French they speak in Paris, they're very different. And because the Quebecois, the French Canadian French, it's an old style. It's old fashioned. It hasn't updated itself because it's been isolated from the rest of France, of French speakers. But here, we're going to hear some of the different influences, and this is Middle English from 1066 to 1500 AD. So now we're getting closer and closer to modern age. It's just only 500 years about, but we see the of this, and you might have seen this before, the Canterbury Tales. Let's listen and see.
Lines 1 through 18 of the general prologue to the Canterbury Tales.
That's English, modern English.
One that April with his shore sota, the drocht of March had perced to the rota, and bathed every vein in swish liquor, of which virtue engendered is the floor. One Zephyrus ache with his sweater breath, in spirit hath in every heart and head. The tender cruppies and the younger sona hath in the ram his half a course hirona. And smaller fools machen melodia, that slepen all the nicht with open ear. So pricketh hem natur in hier courages. Then long in fug taugun on pilgrimages, and palmeres fortus seken strange strondes, tel ferne hallways, couth in sundry landes. And specially from every sheer's ende of England to Canterbury they wenda.
Okay, we're going to pause here. I think this is it's it's more understandable, it's more comprehensible. Listening to it, there's things you can hear. You've watching the screen, you can see that the spelling is different though. But let's take a back look. And
Tails. One that April with his shore sota, the dracht of March had perse to the rota.
oh, shooty patooty. I wanted to pause.
Of the general prologue. One that
So we say one that April with sure sota, the rots of March hath patched to the rota. We see the names of the month there, April and March. Now they used April, which if you were to look it up in German, April is April. And March is March, of course. But we see it's starting to sound familiar, understandable, comprehensible.
April with his shore sota, the dracht of March had perse to the rota. And bathed every vein in swish liquor, of which virtue engendered is the floor.
Now, and bathed. Now we now pronounce that word bathed, but bathed. Bathed, of course, is the past tense word of to bath, B-A-T-H, or B-A-T-H-E, as how we say now, to bathe. But bathed. So we see that. We see the influence of that. And then switch liqueur. You might have heard this word as liqueur, or liquor. That's alcohol. And then, of which virtue engeldet is the fleur. The fleur. Now notice the spelling is F-L-U-R, fleur, which is, of course, milkaru now, the powdered grain. But here it's the flour,
One zephyrus ache with his sweater breath, in spirit hath in every heart and hath.
We see breath, B-R-E-E-T-H. Now we use a different spelling, but we can understand it.
The tender croppies and the younger sona hath in the ram his half a course hirona. En smale fooles machen melodie, that slepen all the nicht with open ear.
All right, this one's fun. And smarlen fools machen Melodie, and small fowls make melody. You know this. The word fowl, F-O-W-L-E, or F-O-W-L, that's a bird, but it's the French word for bird. And so we're seeing the influence here coming in, the French influence coming in. Machen means make, of course, but that's German. That slepen all the Nichte, but notice the spelling, N-Y-G-H-T. That's because people used to pronounce the Nichte, the sound, G-H-T, but now we don't say that. We say night. So even though the pronunciations change, we've kept the old influence of the spelling. And that's where it comes. So we're not going to have a test. This won't be on a test, but I think it's very interesting to be aware of why is English spelled some ways. Why is it N-I-G-H-T and not N-I-T or N-I-T-E? Because of the German influences. And we see here a lot of French-based vocabularies in modern English as well. Fowl, this bird, comes from poulet. Beef, of course, boeuf. Giant. We see a lot of French vocabulary that helps expand our things. Of course, there's lots and lots of French in English. For example, chef, restaurant, rendezvous. Those are all French words. There's lots of French words, and we use them to help create a variety in our modern English. And speaking of modern English, this is an example of modern English. Now, early modern English. We are now what we call, some people call it late modern English or current modern English. But early modern English, it's 1500 to 1700, we see the words. And looking at the words, you can understand. You can understand it. Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose ventured piteous overthrows do with their death bury their parents' strife. The fearful passage of their death-marked love, and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end naught could remove, is now the 2 hours' traffic of our stage, the which if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. That is modern English. Those words, I would dare say 95% of them, you've seen before, or you can figure them out. It's perfectly fine. This is William Shakespeare, of course. This is the opening of Romeo and Juliet. But we see, and we can, if I say it, you can recognize the sounds. It sounds old. It sounds old-fashioned, yes. It is antiquated. But the grammar, the syntax, that's the same. So that's a brief overview of English. But here's the thing. Language is still changing. Other influences of change are, of course, inventions. Because we invent new things, and we need to make words for new things. Makes sense? So, horseless carriage is what we used to call cars, or automobiles. And I want you to think, what do we call a car in Korean? Cha-dong-cha, right? What do we call a wagon pulled by a horse? What's macha or cha? And so a cha-dong-cha is automatic or auto-moving wagon. That's what it means. So it's a new word invented to meet a new need. So inventions play a big role, of course, as well. Marketing and commercial forces also play a role in vocabulary. One example I think of, I'm old enough to remember this, podcast. A podcast is just an audio recording released onto the internet. That's all. That's what it is. It's a kind of talk show or something. Apple didn't invent the podcast. People have been putting their files up as WAV files or streaming or real media player files, things like that, for years and years before Apple made the word podcast. But they took it over. That happened. This has happened a lot with different things as well. Apple didn't invent the MP3 player. They didn't invent lots of things. They've just made very good ones. Another example would be like Band-Aid. Band-Aid, the company, now owned by Johnson & Johnson, they didn't invent the adhesive bandage that we use now. But we use the word Band-Aid. Or in the UK, they use the word Hoover for a vacuum cleaner. That's a brand. The word for stapler in Korean and Japanese is Hotchkiss. And that's a company that went out of business 100 years ago that made staplers. But when, that's the word people used. People also use the word Google as a verb. Google wasn't the first search engine. They weren't the second. They weren't even the 10th. What they did it better. And they became very, very powerful, and I think too powerful now, but that's okay. Now, so these are other influences. Marketing, technology can also affect our vocabulary. Slang is another form. Slang is very temporary, of course. It's how people talk. Different population, different subgroups use different words for slang. So slang is definitely time and age based. Slang is very temporary. On fleek. That was very, very popular about 5 years ago. Now I don't hear it at all. But it was all the cool kids used to say it back in their teenagers. Now nobody says it. Fat is what we used to say. P-H-A-T. As you would describe a young woman as fat because it was pretty, hot, and tempting. It was a nice thing to be fat and things like that. Words like swell, swell is a word for good. Even a word like cool, cool has stayed around for a long time, meaning a good thing. But other words have changed meaning quite a lot. Word example is the word gay, Gay. Now used to refer to homosexual men mostly. My grandparents, to them, the word gay meant happy, as in like you're feeling happy, you're feeling gay, and that was a perfect. That's how they used it, and so it is. That's one clear example. The word changes meaning, radically changes the meaning. Some words were offensive or not offensive, and now they're considered offensive. That's quite common as well. That's always been the case, but there's certain words that we used to say that we don't say anymore, and that's okay. Either because they were just mean words, or that well, things change. But the word dude, Dude, now dude is means like it's a generic word for an individual. It can be used for a man, mostly used for men, but it's sometimes used for women in a non-insulting way. When they first started using the word, it was an insult against gay people. Of course, that word gay didn't exist. Gay meant happy, so the word dude was used as an insult. As in, you call a guy a dude, you are calling him a homosexual, a gay man, and so, but that word changed into something more positive, just being like a man, just a generic word for a man. So words can change meaning over generations, over time. Nowadays, with the internet, words can change meaning very, very quickly, and we can have new words or new expressions, new phrases immediately, and then they get used or overused and things like that. And now there are actually people who like to troll the normies, as we might say, with creating gestures or using gestures and saying that they're bad or things like that. So, and we've seen this again and again. See how hypersensitive some people are about particular hand gestures. And sometimes it's meant seriously, and sometimes it's meant as a joke, and we don't really know. It's all very hard. What I'm trying to say, I don't like teaching slang because it is hard, and it's very easy to misinterpret. It's very easy to for the slang I teach to be to become, for their meaning, for their words to become offensive or insulting in future years. And I don't want to teach my students anything bad. I'm a nice guy. So when I do teach slang, I like to keep it very, very vanilla, as in slang that is multi-generational, slang words, casual words that have been around for a long time. If you want to learn slang as well, you can do it on your own. But I'm old. I was born December 1983. You were born what? I forget. 2001, 2002. I was entering university when you were busy being born. We are very different generations, and so the slang of our age groups are different. And I'll give you an example of that. If I teach you slang and you teach your students that slang, then you're teaching your elementary school students slang that is now, 30 or 40 years old. And then we run into Dutch pay and phrase like take a rest. When I came to Korea, I heard Dutch pay, take a rest. I heard that all the time. I heard it everywhere. I didn't know what that meant. Well, I knew what take a rest meant, and I figured out what Dutch pay meant. But everyone's like, let's Dutch pay this. I'm like, what is Dutch pay? What does that mean? I don't know what it means. What is Dutch pay? Dutch pay is, of course, means to pay separately at a restaurant, pay for your things. I didn't know those words, the phrases, but my parents did. They used to say it. They said it when they were younger. It was an example of a slang phrase that they used that people stopped using in America at least, but Korean English teachers kept teaching. So Korean students were taught these words and phrases as authentic English, and yeah, but I, as a native speaker, I didn't understand it. They were older phrases that I didn't understand, and I don't want that to happen to you. But learning new slang words it's very tiring as well. It's very tiring. So, but there's lots of new words and phrases. Words change meaning. Of course, slang can also become very inappropriate depending on the situation. Vulgar. They can become insults very easily as well. So I like avoiding those dangers, those pitfalls as much as I can. Alrighty, dighty, there you go. Hachi machi. We have the German influences, we've got the Latin influences, we've got the French influences, so many influences on English. On E-Class, I'm going to have a short homework assignment. I want you to try and find and examine a little bit some foreign loanword in English. Try to find. I'll write it on E-Class, and we'll see how it goes. But it'll be under discussion, and I'm going to ask you to consider some of the foreign influences on English, and to discuss about them a little bit, to write about them a little bit. Nothing too much, but I want us to use our muscles a little bit. Don't forget, we got projects due coming up. Make sure your flagged redesign projects are taken care of. All right. Have an excellent week, and stay eyes peeled on E-Class. Stay safe. Goodbye.